What is a scary or horrifying fact that shouldn't be true but is? Story 1. Rabies is exceptionally common, but people just don't run into the animals that carry it often. Skunks, especially, and bats. Let me paint you a picture. You go camping, and at midday you decide to take a nap in a nice little hammock. While sleeping, a tiny brown bat, in the rage stages of infection, is fidgeting in broad daylight, uncomfortable and thirsty due to hydrophobia, and you snort, startling him. He goes into attack mode. Except you're asleep, and he's a little brown bat, so he weighs around 6 grams. You don't even feel him land on your bare knee. And he starts to bite. His teeth are tiny, hardly enough to even break the skin, but he does manage to give you the equivalent of a tiny scrape that goes completely unnoticed. Rabies do not travel in your blood. In fact, a blood test won't even tell you if you've got it. Antibody tests may be done but are useless if you've ever been vaccinated. You wake up, none the wiser. If you notice anything at the bite site at all, you assume you just lightly scraped it on something. The bomb has been lit, and your nervous system is the wick. The rabies will multiply along with your nervous system, doing virtually no damage and completely undetectable. You literally have no symptoms. It may be 4 days, it may be a year, but the camping trip is most likely long forgotten. Then one day your back starts to ache, or maybe you get a slight headache. At this point, you're already dead. There is no cure. There's no treatment. It has a 100% death rate. Absorb that. Not a single other virus on the planet has a 100% death rate. Only rabies. And once you're symptomatic, it's over. You're dead. So, what does that look like? Your headache turns into a fever, and a general feeling of being unwell. You're fidgety, uncomfortable, and scared. As the virus that has taken its time getting into your brain finds a vast network of nerve endings, it begins to rapidly reproduce, starting at the base of your brain, where your pons is located. This is the part of the brain that controls communication between the rest of the brain and body, as well as sleep cycles. Next, you become anxious. You still think you have only a mild fever, but suddenly you find yourself becoming scared, even horrified, and it doesn't occur to you that you don't know why. This is because the rabies is chewing up your amygdala. As your cerebellum becomes hot with the virus, you begin to lose muscle coordination and balance. You think maybe it's a good idea to go to the doctor now, but assuming a doctor is smart enough to even run the tests necessary in the few days you have left on the planet, odds are they'll only be able to tell your loved ones what you died of later. You're twitchy, shaking, and scared. You have the normal fear of not knowing what's going on, but with the virus really messing with the amygdala, this is amplified 100-fold. It's around this time the hydrophobia starts. You're horribly thirsty. You just want water, but you can drink. Every time you do, your throat clamps shut and you vomit. This has become a legitimate, active fear of water. You're thirsty, but looking at a glass of water begins to make you gag and shy back in fear. The contradiction is hard for your hot brain to see at this point. By now, the doctors will have to put you on I.VUS to keep you hydrated, but even that's futile. You were dead the second you had a headache. You begin hearing things, or not hearing at all as your thalamus goes. You taste sounds, you see smells. Everything starts feeling like the most horrifying acid trip anyone has ever been on. With your hippocampus long under attack, you're having trouble remembering things, especially family. You're alone, hallucinating, thirsty, confused, and absolutely, undeniably terrified. Everything scares the literal crap out of you at this point. These strange people in lab coats, these strange people standing around your bed, crying, who keep trying to get you to drink something and crying. And it's only been about a week since that little headache that you've completely forgotten. Time means nothing to you anymore. Funny enough, you now know how the bat felt when he bit you. Eventually, you slip into the dumb rabies phase. Your brain has started the process of shutting down. Too much of it has been turned to liquid viruses. Your face droops. You drool. You're all but unaware of what's around you. A sudden noise or light might startle you, but for the most part, it's all you can do to just stare at the ground. You haven't really slept for about 72 hours. Then you die. Always you die. and there's not one frigging thing that anyone can do it for you. Then there's the question of what to do with your corpse. I mean, sure, burying it is the right thing to do, but the frigging virus can survive in a corpse for years. You could kill every rabid animal on the planet today, and if 2 years from now some moist, preserved, rotten hunk of a used-to-be brain gets eaten by an animal, it starts all over. So yeah, rabies scares the crap out of me, and it's frigging everywhere. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. Some monks used to endure a spiritual practice whereby they eliminated all their body fat through diet and exercise, ate wood lacquer tea to end internal bacteria, then sealed themselves in a tomb holding a string attached to a bell. A year after the bell stopped ringing, the tomb was opened, and if the monk's body was found to be uncorrupted, they were revered as a saint. If not, they were reburied. The process took years, and as they continued, the monks required more and more help from their brothers until they entered the tomb, and the whole time you'd hear bells ringing from the nearby tombs as the monks inside slowly wound down the last days of their lives, voluntarily poisoned, starved, and buried alive for a chance at sainthood. Story 3. The final moments of Andreas Prodromou, one of the flight attendants on Helios 522 that crashed in Greece in 2005. The pilots failed to flip a switch on the plane that would allow the plane to pressurize itself, not noticing it was switched to manual rather than auto. During the flight, the pressure in the cabin dropped, meaning the passengers and crew were slowly being drained of oxygen, and they soon lost consciousness. Andreas Prodromou managed to find a backup supply of oxygen, and even though he was suffering from hypoxia too, for a while he was the only one conscious as everyone was passed out and slowly dying around him. As he held a UK pilot's license, he entered the cockpit and sat down in the empty captain's seat. I am not sure why the captain left his seat, in what investigators believe was an attempt to save the plane, but unfortunately, his training was not enough, as he was only trained to fly small planes, not Boeing 737s like the accident flight. He also called Mayday 5 times into the radio, but because it was tuned to the wrong airport, nobody could hear him. Soon after he entered the cockpit, the plane ran out of fuel, and the engines flamed out, so even if he could flown the 737, there still was nothing he could have done. The plane crashed into the hills outside Athens, ending all on board. Wow. Being the only one conscious whilst your colleagues and passengers died around you, not knowing what's going on, and trying to help, but not being able to do anything, is just nightmare fuel to me. Story 4. The oubliette, in French, or the forgotten room, as translated in English. In medieval times, people would be descended into these rooms which were like 35 feet deep below the ground as punishment. They were narrow, funnel-shaped, with the only way in or out being through a trapdoor on the roof, through which they are lowered down in the first place. Kings and lords would torture people by keeping them in the oubliette because these rooms would be so narrow there would be no space to sit or even turn. These prisoners would be left there to starve while standing 24 hours and 7 days a week to their death, sometimes among the bones and human wastes of the inmates who had died before them. The only light, if there was any, would come from the trapdoor on the roof. There would be absolutely no chance of escape, as it was impossible to climb up the walls of the narrow passage. These were designed to inflict tremendous psychological torture on the prisoner, often leading them into delirium. Absolute horror as to what we are capable of doing to our fellow human beings. Story 5. There's a castle in Northumberland, UK that's now an outdoors activity holiday center for kids that has an oubliette that was used for medieval punishment. Often people were just thrown in there and left to die. One story though, in the 1700s, when the castle was no longer a defensive point and simply a stately home for a wealthy family, the son of the owners got drunk with a couple of friends and dared one of his friends to be lowered into the oubliette and stay there for an hour. My friend took the dare, lowered him down, removed the rope, and covered the entrance hole. Then continued drinking and got so drunk, they forgot he was down there. They rode to another friend's house a few miles away for the rest of the night, remembering and returning in a panic nearly 48 hours later. A friend in the oubliette was still alive, but had completely lost his mind, had to be institutionalized and never regained his sanity. And on top of that, he had scratched at the walls of the oubliette so much and so roughly that he had worn all his fingers down to stubs. I love telling the kids that story just before bed on our residential trips there. Story 6. In the United States, it's still common for newborn baby boys to be taken into an operating room, tied down into a special restraining device, and have the end of their manhood carefully removed, without any anesthesia. They literally operated on cold, in spite of the baby's crying, and the fact that some of them hyperventilate or lose control of their bowels due to the pain. Some of the people responsible for conditioning the practice maintain the idea that they can feel it or that it's just a little snip of skin, which is cognitive dissonance on a level that defies belief. Some babies even bleed severely as a result of it, rendering only a statistic, a footnote. The baby has part of its intimate organ disabled years before the age of physical maturity and will never know what natural banging feels like. There is almost never any medical need for this, and it continues only because it makes the hospital bonus money and because of cultural conditioning. Many people who have been the victim of this surgery go on to have it done to their own children. Story 7. There is a worldwide organization of about 5,000 members that has a purpose of helping each other capture and keep S-workers. FBI criminal profiler John Douglas describes it in his book Anyone You Want Me to Be, which is a book about the first serial killer known to the FBI to use the internet to find and lure his victims. As an example of what they do for each other, if one of them needs to create evidence to make it appear like one of their victims has merely traveled far away, he will forge a letter typically typewritten. Of course, minus because of the extreme difficulty of duplicating another person's handwriting that appears like a letter to home from the captive, address it to the captive's relatives, put it in a plain brown envelope, and mail it to another member of the network who lives on the other side of the planet, and include some money to pay for postage. When any of them receives such a package from another member, they mail all the enclosed letters to home, thereby providing police back home with a reason to believe the victim isn't a victim at all and has merely traveled to someplace far away. Story 8. I remember back in 2011 I went up to the Northern Territory for a bit. I live in Melbourne with my family. I would have been about 7 or 8 at the time. One of the days we were there, we went to this river that had these kind of holes along the way where people would just swim around and chill out. You could start at one end and swim down the river, stopping at these smaller areas to rest for a bit. On our way there, some guy walked past us and told my dad that he had seen a crocodile in the water. He didn't say it in a way where he was actually warning us about a crocodile. It was more of a fun tone, so we just shrugged it off and continued on. While we were there, my mum stayed with my sister, who was only 2 at the time, so it was only my brother, who is 2 years older than me, myself, and my dad. At one point, while we were swimming, I veered off a little bit, probably only about 5 or so meters, just casually swimming around. At one point, I looked down and saw what looked an awful lot like a crocodile. I stayed still and stared at it for a bit, trying to figure out if it was actually a crocodile. It didn't move, so I just swam off back to my family. From that point onwards, I was a slight bit scared, but I eventually convinced myself that it was just a log. The next day, my dad went down in the morning to grab some things from the shop as well as the newspaper. Right on the front page was a story of an elderly lady who had her ear bitten off by a crocodile in the same place we had just been swimming. Only a few hours later, I still feel like that was a log below me, but I still wonder if I was that close to being attacked by a crocodile. Story 9. I heard someone complaining about someone else complaining about a family house shopping in Florida that wanted absolutely no chance of encountering an alligator. The first-level complainer was saying that was so ridiculous. The second-level complainer, not from Florida, thought it was a perfectly reasonable request. I had to point out that the only way to guarantee no alligators on your property in Florida was to completely fence it in with a fence that went at least 2 feet underground, 6 feet above ground, and was perfectly smooth. Gators dig. Gators climb trees and chain-link fences. You should assume any body of water where you can see the bottom has an alligator in it. If you can handle this, stay out of Florida, southern Georgia, southern South Carolina, southern Alabama, southern Mississippi, Louisiana, and eastern Texas. Story 10. One of the experiments the Japanese did during World War II at Unit 731 was cutting off limbs of living, waking people without anesthesia and sewing those limbs onto other prisoners. They also infected male prisoners with various infectious diseases, then forced them at gunpoint to commit SA on pregnant prisoners to see if the disease would transmit to the baby. Story 11. So everyone knows about electroshock therapy and how they did it in the 60s, and it was horrible. My grandmother underwent it at one point. What people don't know is they still do it. The only difference is now they put you under for it. You don't feel a thing and you have a probability, and I actually did, of stopping breathing and needing to be resuscitated. Because they put you so far under, they have to breathe for you. Also, waking up from ECT can be pretty terrifying because all you know is 1 minute they had you counting down and the next minute you're still hooked up to an IV and you're not entirely sure where the freak you are or what just happened. Before I had to stop, for some odd reason, if you code they make you stop. The nurse people learned that I could and would do anything to get an IV out. And you've usually got about 6 people freaking out as they wake up. Story 12. In 2010, I got an MRSA infection, spent 6 weeks in and out of hospital, ending in organ failure and sepsis, and nearly died. 2 months later, I was back in again. 2 months after that, I was back again. On my third admittance, they had run out of antibiotics to give me. The doctors researched for hours to find something they could try. They dug up an old antibiotic with terrible side effects and tried it, but it didn't work. Luckily, one of the ones I had previously tried and had a bad reaction to during sepsis, so probably not the medication. They tried again, and it worked. But being deathly ill while the doctors have no idea what to give you is a scary place to be. Story 13. In Argentina, we have no DNA bank and a barely functional fingerprint detection system, even though we invented it. Also, negligence by forensics is the norm. What does this mean? In Argentina, if you off someone you don't like, but the cops never suspect you, you'll never ever be remotely close to being busted. In fact, anyone could get away with ending a stranger at any time without previous preparation. And if they somehow catch you red-handed, a life sentence is 35 years here with parole every couple of years, and there's a law that says that every 2 people that get incarcerated, 1 must be freed, so there's always the chance you'll get randomly freed. Also, the average time a person who ends someone does here is between 10 and 20 years. The fact that we don't off each other as much means anarchy could possibly work, I guess. Story 14. There is a parasite that can severely damage your brain. It's called Naegleria fowler, and it lives in warm water lakes in the sand and silt in the shallows. It can enter through your nose and begin attacking your neurons and brain tissue. Usually, symptoms occur around 4 hours after infection and include headache, sensitivity to light, and nausea. If you experience any of these after swimming in a lake, you need to go to the hospital as soon as possible. If left undiagnosed, it can be fatal within 24 hours. To diagnose it, you'll need a spinal tap and a lab tech who knows exactly what to look for. Story 15. Long-dormant bacteria and viruses, trapped in ice and permafrost for centuries, are reviving as Earth's climate warms. Also, gamma-ray bursts can off all life on Earth without any warning. Story 16. In 2009, a paralyzed Belgian awoke from a 23-years-long coma, and it was discovered he was fully conscious and could hear everything around him the entire time. Like, what the actual hell? Just imagine lying there not being able to move for 2 decades, but also being aware of your surroundings. That's all kinds of messed up nightmare fuel right there. Story 17. The Amazon forest has a huge gap of virgin forest between Brazil and other countries, places kilometers away from the nearest cities. The Brazilian Institute for Native Indians FUNAI has agents overlooking tribes, and they take flights over the forest and always end up spotting huts, fire pits, and bow and arrow armed men. There are plenty of unknown tribes hiding somewhere in that huge forest, people never contacted by civilization. The fun fact is, even the Institute agents have no idea of the number, types, and tribes inside. They can track down, account for, or detect their genealogy. The Amazon forest is a complex and humid place. You could hide a family of elephants inside, and you wouldn't see it from the sky. Story 18. Khalid El Masri is a German and Lebanese citizen who was mistakenly abducted by the Macedonian police in 2003 and handed over to the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency (CIA). While in CIA custody, he was flown to Afghanistan, where he was held at a black site and routinely interrogated, beaten, strip-searched, and subjected to other cruel forms of inhumane and degrading treatment and torture. After El Masri held hunger strikes and was detained for 4 months in the salt pit, the CIA finally admitted his arrest and torture were a mistake and released him. He is believed to be among an estimated 3,000 detainees whom the CIA abducted from 2001 to 2005. In May 2004, the U.S. ambassador to Germany, Daniel R. Coates, convinced the German Interior Minister, Otto Schily, not to press charges or to reveal the program. El Masri filed suit against the CIA for his arrest, extraordinary rendition, and torture. In 2006, his suit El Masri v. Tenet, in which he was represented by the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, was dismissed by the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia, based on the U.S. government's claim of the state secrets privilege. The ACLU said the Bush administration attempted to shield its abuses by invoking this privilege. The case was also dismissed by the Appeals Court for the Fourth Circuit, and in December 2007, the United States Supreme Court declined to hear the case. On 13 December 2012, El Masri won an Article 34 case at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. The court determined he had been tortured while held by CIA agents and ruled that Macedonia was responsible for abusing him while in the country and knowingly transferring him to the CIA when torture was a possibility. It awarded him compensation, which was nothing. This marked the first time that CIA's activities against detainees were legally declared as torture. The European Court condemned nations for collaborating with the United States in these secret programs. Story 19. You might feel like the healthiest person in the world and yet still randomly die in your sleep. Sudden arrhythmic death syndrome is just one example. There are tons of small obstructions and irregularities that your heart could be suffering from that go completely unnoticed by you, your friends, and your doctors. You might be at an increased risk of just passing on when you go to bed tonight, and no one would even suspect as much until you actually died. Story 20. Something is eating the Milky Way galaxy. No, it isn't the plot for a Star Trek episode, it's really happening. In 2009, researchers found a cluster of galaxies moving at an extraordinary speed towards a small patch of sky between the constellations of Centaurus and Vela. Some unknown force is tearing away chunks of the galaxy, and astronomers still have no clue what exactly is causing it. It's been named dark flow. There is something big out there, far bigger than anything in our known universe. Such a behemoth would impose a kind of tilt on the universe, causing matter to move in one particular direction, as observations of the dark flow suggest, could be anything up to and including another universe. Story 21. The fact about how dark the behind-the-scenes of The Wizard of Oz is, in Judy Garland's, Dorothy, own words. They had us working days and nights on end. They'd give us pep-up pills to keep us on our feet, long after we were exhausted. Then they'd take us to the studio hospital and knock us cold with sleeping pills, Mickey sprawled out on one bed, and me on another. Then after 4 hours, they'd wake us up and give us the pep-up pills again so we could work another 72 hours in a row. Half of the time we were hanging from the ceiling, but it became a way of life for us. Story 22. I am not sure this quite holds up in the finer details. A quick search for the Indian cheetah leads to the Asiatic cheetah, which survives in Iran. It's believed to be extinct in India since 1947. Reintroduction efforts are underway, sourcing populations from Iran and Africa. The Sumatran rhino is in dire condition, but there are still tiny wild populations and captive breeding programs. The Chinese paddlefish has had only 2 confirmed sightings since 2000 and is likely extinct. The Yangtze giant soft-shell turtle is critically endangered, with occasional rediscoveries in the wild and some breeding attempts in captivity. The Spix macaw is extinct in the wild but has reintroduction plans from captive populations. The Catarina pupfish went extinct in 2014. The Indo-Chinese tiger was last photographed in Thailand in spring 2020. Anti-poaching patrols have been increasing since 2006. We must stay concerned about extinction threats, but also focus on accurate facts when spreading awareness. Story 23. 1 in 5 Americans are suffering through a mental illness right now with no help. Also, here's a disturbing story I read about. A girl in 2005 suffered from anorexia, an eating disorder. This caused her to try to off herself 3 times. When her father begged the insurance company for a therapist, the company said no, citing, "There would have to be a larger cause of harm to the person or to someone else," paraphrased. This essentially means she would have to try to off herself again or hurt someone. It was only after this story was leaked that the insurance company gave the girl a therapist. Story 24. The Uyghur population of China is under 24-hour surveillance and are regularly scooped up and dropped into labor camps in the middle of the night. They are the victims of some serious atrocities, or what one might consider the usual suspects for trying to wipe out an entire diaspora, like forced abortions and sterilization. If that was not bad enough, they found evidence that these people were being used to harvest their hair for wigs. If that was not bad enough, they also found evidence these folks were being used for harvesting their organs. Lastly, they also go after children. Unimaginable. Story 25. Any one of us at literally any point can die from so many things out there that we have absolutely zero control over and can do absolutely nothing about. Just look at a gamma-ray burst, for example. It travels at the speed of light, and it would hit us all with a deadly dose of radiation that would end over 99% of this planet's life forms. Since it travels at light speed, there is absolutely no way to know in advance about it, only after it has happened. In fact, it might have happened just now, and since it's gamma radiation, there are going to be very few people who will be sheltered from the dose when it happens. Not that it would matter, because it would simply nuke all of our food sources. Story 26. The Purdue company knew its OxyContin drug was as addictive as regular opioids, but they fudged the research and outright lied to doctors so that they would prescribe the drug to their patients. They would also target doctors that were more likely to prescribe harder drugs and doctors that were not experienced in making sure people do not get addicted to drugs. They were prescribing and would lobby these doctors into prescribing OxyContin. These were called pill mills. Many people ended up getting addicted, making the opioid epidemic worse in America and turning the victims of their wrongdoings into scapegoats. Doctors would prescribe this medicine to people with chronic pain, saying it would numb the pain for up to 12 hours so they could sleep at night, but it ended up only lasting usually around 6 to 8 hours. This would cause people to run through their prescriptions faster and ask their doctors to up their dosage. The Sackler family, who is in charge of Purdue, was once upset that they were only making $20 million a week and wanted to be making more. No one from the Sackler family went to jail for this. Story 27. The majority of parasitic infections, or at least a substantial minority, depending on the type of parasite, are asymptomatic, meaning that you could have worms in your body right now and have no clue. Now for the good news. Your body is actually pretty good at getting rid of parasitic infections on its own. Additionally, you can cure most infestations with coconut. I successfully got rid of diarrhea using nothing but a tablespoon of coconut oil in a cup of hot chocolate every morning for a few weeks. Story 28. The human race will never overcome its sense of tribalism and inherent selfishness to the point of destroying ourselves. And it's not entirely our fault. We simply did not evolve with the means to cope with how many different people are on the planet. The way our society has come to be will never allow us to band together to stop our self-destructive behavior before we either all end ourselves in war or make our planet uninhabitable for us. The largest threat to humanity isn't some cosmic event, not in the near future anyway. It's ourselves. But we mostly all turn a blind eye to it. No one talks about the human condition being the problem for humanity itself. Everyone's reality is their own. I am the villain in someone else's story, but I certainly don't view myself that way. I try to be a good person in general, as most people do. However, not all truths are the same for everyone. The low-hanging fruit would be to point the finger at religion, but that's not entirely fair. Think about how many different cultures are out there. Think about how each of those cultures hold different values on certain things: morality, customs, traditions, etc. Try to think of yourself being raised in the most opposite culture you can think of. Take your current moral compass and try to think about it from their perspective. If you're a US leftist, really try to put yourself in the right shoes. You likely can't without getting angry or at least upset. Sure, I know they were raised around that, but why can't they see that isn't okay? The same reason you can see it as ever being okay. We've allowed our comfortable, convenient life to take the president and pretty much control us. We like the lives we have. We love the convenience of it no matter the cost. Because we really don't like to think about the human cost of our new phones, cheap clothes, cheap food, easily accessible anything, etc. It's uncomfortable for us. And because of that, nothing will change in a meaningful way anytime soon, and it's likely already too late. Story 29. I don't know if it is scary, but the whale falls. The deep sea scares me. When whales die in deep cold water, they sink instead of float and do not decompose as quickly. Bringing huge amounts of biomass to deep waters causes underwater creatures to grow rapidly, forming communities around the dead whale. This can force evolution or genetic mutations when creatures are rapidly reproducing. Deep-sea creatures have strange appearances and genetics. Maybe Cthulhu or Atlantis exists? Story 30. If you took every nuke in the world and used the average yield of all those nukes, you could only carpet bomb a country the size of Madagascar, or a bit bigger than Germany, with everything being hit by a minimum of 3 pounds per square inch of pressure, which is being hit by 102 miles per hour of air pressure or 164 kilometers per hour. Even with 100% targeted nuking, we don't have enough nukes to end all humans. Story 31. More people died from the United Kingdom's austerity policy pursued from 2010 than have died there from COVID. This took many different forms. One of the most brutal was so-called benefit sanctions, by which people's welfare benefits, which people had been able to rely on for decades, were suddenly pulled without warning, leaving people with no income. Unlike in the US, there are no mandatory federal food stamps. The poor over there are left in horrible conditions of starvation to death. Unlike in LA, the streets aren't warm but frequently rainy and freezing cold, and the homeless will be left to shiver to death on the streets. These words will undoubtedly hurt the egos and national pride of many Brits, so they will endeavor to conceal the truth. But this very instinct and reflex of theirs is precisely why the truth has been covered up for so long. They are furious in response to telling the truth, as extremists always are. I am just stating facts which can be verified very easily, and indeed which the UN has already reported on. Usually in these situations, the sanctioned welfare claimants would be given referrals to so-called food banks, that is, private charities, but these were often miles away and often gave out tins of food that required use of a stove or microwave, when some people had zero money even for electricity. On top of that, there was the broader refusal to fund the NHS in line with demographic change, and the Tory tabloid media put out talking points about how they can't keep throwing money at the problem. In fact, the UK's per capita health spending was already beneath France and Germany. They weren't throwing money at the problem, and that was precisely the point. The result was record ambulance waiting times and a general deterioration of the service, which has undoubtedly increased the COVID death toll. These funding cuts were made while Cameron was pushing for lower taxes on the rich and increasing foreign aid. Despite that the UK was already one of the world's top givers per capita, it was evident that he just wanted to siphon money out of the public realm for the usual purpose. Many of his policies actually preceded and presaged Donald Trump, including the routine about casting doubt on the election result. Cameron didn't do it, but he was planning, in the event that he lost, to announce that SNP votes for his opponent Ed Miliband were invalid, of course, without having any constitutional basis for doing so. Story 32. I have a story for you. First of all, you don't have to get bit to contract rabies. If their mucus touches your mucous membrane, think mouth or nose, you can still contract rabies. I once got drunk, Fed a raccoon an Oreo from my mouth, and its nose touched the inside of my nostril. It seemed harmless, and made for a cool story. A friend that took a video of it got it posted on Barstool Outdoors. A day or so went by, and I got a call from the CDC, telling me to go get a rabies vaccination to avoid contracting the disease. You bet your sweet buns, I got to the clinic as quickly as I could. The vaccine is administered over several weeks and is expensive as a freak. Moral of the story: don't mess with wild rodents. Story 33. Disturbing fact number 1. It is estimated that the number of vertebrate animals used every year for experimentation ranges between the tens of millions and 100 million. This is justified in the name of human progress. Which brings me to unsettling fact number 2. Despite millennia of human progress, there is absolutely zero evidence that humanity as a species is actually any happier than we were as primitive hunter-gatherers. Meanwhile, there's irrefutable evidence that every other species on the planet is much worse off, thanks to our relentless march towards progress. Disturbing fact number 3. Not one person can adequately answer that question. Story 34. Here in Russia, we have the highest self-offing rate in the world revolving males. 2 of my family members offed themselves, uncle and cousin, not related, and everyone pretends it didn't happen, like they died accidentally. Because no one frigging cares. Yesterday I heard a woman say to her son, "No, don't cry. You're a man, aren't you?" How convenient. In my husband's family, they don't have a single man who lived longer than 65, and 2 of my male family members died while working. Were they even considered to be humans, or just money-making machines who had zero rights to have emotions? In Russia, many people say, her money is her money, his money is a family budget. Quite frankly, I just got tired of my male family members dying and offing themselves, and yet everyone ignores it, because it just doesn't matter. Story 35. The Beast of Gévaudan is a well-documented story of a beast that terrorized the French countryside of the early 18th century. It was described as a huge hyena-like creature the size of a horse. It was active periodically for several years. Many times it was claimed to be ended, but ultimately it always returned. This creature offed about 200 actual people, and nobody could do anything about it. The King of France once sent his own heavily armored horseman regiment to catch it. Soldiers offed like 6,000 wolves all over the Gévaudan province, but never caught it. The terror beast was finally said to be put to rest only when some hunter shot it right through the heart with an actual silver bullet. Yes, that's actually happened. Story 36. It is not uncommon to see symptoms of AIDS start appearing after 5 to 10 years of infection from HIV. Also, world leaders have failed to take measures to keep the global temperature change to 3 degrees Celsius, and so pushed the new target to 4 degrees, which still seems very difficult, and therefore are trying to push it to 5 degrees. For perspective, the last time global temps changed by 5%, it ended the Ice Age. Also, we're past the point of no return for global warming, and even if this very moment everyone became carbon neutral somehow, we'd still need to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere to get back to acceptable levels. Story 37. Despite the homicide rate going down over the decades, endings are now less likely to be solved. So now, despite the police dealing with less crime, more forensics, better technology, better surveillance, endings are less likely to be solved? Debate on why is pretty unclear, but most cops blamed witnesses for not coming forward with relevant information quickly enough. So basically, people are too scared of the police to come forward because of things like false accusations, police brutality, and being charged with petty crimes. Story 38. If, instead of dying on the cross, Jesus had decided to make himself immortal and grant himself a stipend of $200,000 a day, every single day in perpetuity, and cash those checks every single day for the last 2,000 years, he would still only be the 3rd richest person alive today behind Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, but just ahead of Bill Gates. Story 39. We have no idea where eels come from, and I am not even lying. It's not horrifying, but it keeps me up at night. I have another one. Even though you think about something, you'll never truly know if it's real. You have zero actual validation beyond what you've been told and seen. And like, yeah, 2 plus 2 is 4. But why are there numbers? Why is it 4? What made people decide that two different numbers equal a bigger one? We just have to trust that. All these years, we didn't get misled about learning. Story 40. Vacuum decay can suddenly wipe out existence at the speed of light. We wouldn't know it's coming because at that speed the surrounding space wouldn't change in any way until we were also gone. It's just a massive growing vacuum, the edges of which would be so high energy they may instantly obliterate anything they contact. There is absolutely zero conceivable way to understand what existence would be like inside the new vacuum, but it would not be good, and we would almost assuredly not be there to experience it. But by all means, humans continue to get worked up over gay marriage and abortion and other fictional issues. We must have our priorities, after all. Story 41. The fact that there are more parasites in the world than there are actual sentient beings, most scientists will say it's around 4 to 1, and to quote Professor Foxtrot from What the Heck, 101 when we're all smashed. Absolutely and utterly, and everything in this university is basically doomed, to a cycle of which is infinitely going to be repeated. We are born of nothing, and we shall die as nothing. We shall not leave any marks on the world. Give it 1,000 or so years, it will be like no one was ever here. All it takes is one humanity wiping mistake, and everything on Earth basically ruins words back to origin after a while. Story 42. Some interesting facts about my hometown that will put the scary facts in context. A body decomposes so fast during hot, humid times, like in places like, Georgia, USA. River floodplains are extremely humid places, even when the areas a few miles away have recorded low humidity. The shoulders of roads in rural areas, particularly on dirt roads, are smaller in width than those on interstates or roads within or near high population density areas. That's due to a variety of reasons that usually circle back to low county funds, like not wanting to involve cutting down swaths of trees, or undertake the massive task that is bringing in fill dirt to widen the elevation the road is on, or digging out of the hills or mountains that the road passes to make the shoulders larger. Pink is one of those colors that only appears in camo, that is only for style instead of hunting, because you know it's a pretty vibrant color and won't blend into a vividly green landscape. Cars cannot teleport around trees or activate any sort of inertia dampening enchantment to survive flying off of a road that's 20+ feet higher than the ground elevation directly next to it. A woman was found in her pink car off the side of a road less than 10 feet from shoulder edge, without a single scratch on the car or any indication that she'd lost control of the car and ended up there. I live on this road. I was part of the search when she disappeared 3 months earlier in July of that particular year. Cops said she died from injuries that occurred at time of crash, when there was no damage to the car or surrounding environment. She should be up for sainthood. 100+ Fahrenheit days back-to-back coupled with storms hadn't so much as caused skin slippage. Oh, the last 4 mayors of this town got caught defrauding the county or other felony-level crimes, but the last one was acquitted after the main and only witness to his crime of aggravated banging disappeared during the summer of the year of the trial. This county is known for having only one traffic light. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.